Hello, and welcome to Required Reading, a podcast that revisits the most impactful books from our childhood. I'm your host, Erin Bowles. I'm a writer, actor, and maybe other stuff. I don't know. Lillian Stone is our guest today. She's the author of everybody's favorite Tales from the World's Worst Perfectionist, out now from Day Street Books. She's a headline and features contributor for The Onion and a regular old contributor for outlets like The New Yorker, Slate, Mel Magazine, Reductress, and McSweeney's Internet Tendency. Hello, Lillian.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So, very first thing before we jump in, I like to give a little context on the author, the year it came out, and because this book is set in such a specific time, a little background on that. So it's set our book today, first off, is Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I was so excited you picked this. I've never read it before now. I
What?
know. I'd never read it, and it was like if my mom were to come on this podcast, it's probably what she would do. And I think that's why I didn't read it. I think she gave me like
Whoa.
all 8 of them and was like, here, and I, for that reason, couldn't.
So you had never read any of them?
None of them. I like
Oh,
vaguely
this
knew
is
the
so
parts.
exciting. Okay.
Yeah. So it takes place in 1871 to 1872. Ulysses S. Grant is president. He's passing a series of enforcement acts designed to protect Black people and Reconstruction governments. P.T. Barnum opens his 3-ring circus.
Slay.
Yellowstone becomes the first national park. And Victoria Woodhull becomes the first woman nominated for president of the U.S. Laura Ingalls Wilder was born in 1867 in Wisconsin. Her parents are Charles and Caroline Ingalls. She has an older sister named Mary. It's all very autobiographical. They're farmers and they move around, including Missouri, and eventually settle in South Dakota. At age 18, she marries 28-year-old homesteader Almanzo Wilder, and a year later gives birth to their daughter Rose. They have a son later on, but Rose is the only child who survives to adulthood. And they struggle and subsist in South Dakota and settle in Mansfield, Missouri for like decades. They're just trying to get by.
We're going to talk about it.
And in 1911, she starts writing a column for the Missouri Ruralist, and she's also an editor. And in 1915, Rose is outliving her own life being an adult in San Francisco and starts working as a writer and editor for the San Francisco Bulletin, writing these like formulaic serials. It's like what Louisa May Alcott did. She becomes the first biographer of Herbert Hoover, and in the late 20s is one of the highest paid female writers in America.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so she moves back to Missouri with her parents and she's basically supporting them. And the Depression hits, it's 1930, and Rose is like, you're a writer also, do you want to like try to make some money so we can all have money? So in 1930, Laura approaches Rose with a rough manuscript outlining her childhood. And Rose knows a lot of publishers. She shops it around. Nobody wants it. But one editor says this could be a children's book. So they work on that, and the result is Little House in the Big Woods. It's accepted by Harper and Brothers in late 1931. And am I wrong? Day Street is an imprint of HarperCollins, right?
Yes,
I
correct.
thought that was so cool. I was really tickled by that.
Wow. My literary sister.
Yeah. It comes out in 1932. It's really successful. It has a whole series. And the authorship is a little bit debated between like, what did Laura write? What did Rose write? Who was editing? But it's all one story in the end. And so it comes out 32, very last bit of context. It's the Depression. The Lindbergh baby is kidnapped.
Oh, God.
Nazis are becoming the largest party in the Reichstag. Hindenburg begins negotiations with Hitler about forming a new government. FDR defeats Hoover in a landslide victory, and the character of Goofy is introduced.
Whoa, oh, God, a huge year.
I know. This is the 4th episode I've recorded, and I have learned that we can't end on a downer. We can't.
No.
The last thing can't be O.J. Simpson is declared not guilty.
Right. Also, worth unpacking that the Lindbergh baby is kidnapped the same year that Goofy's introduced. I feel that there's got to be some sort of spiritual connection there.
Oh my gosh. What is your story with this book? How did it come to you?
I tried so hard to remember because I knew you were going to ask that. And my best guess, because I read it when I was very, very young, is that we had a woman who lived across the street who was like a homeschool mom. She was incredibly wholesome. She was like probably an early homesteader. in hopefully a non-problematic way, but I am fairly positive that I borrowed it from her daughter and then I got my own copy because I was so enthralled with it.
Mhm.
So a little bit of background on where I'm from. I'm
Mhm.
from Springfield, Missouri, which is near the Missouri-Arkansas border. It's in like the southwest part of the state. And we are like an hour away from Mansfield, Missouri, which is
Okay.
where Laura Ingalls and Almanzo made their life together. And so
Yeah.
the Laura Ingalls Wilder heritage is huge here. Her house is still there. They have like an annual festival where they celebrate her life and her books. So
Oh my
it's
gosh.
a pretty huge claim to fame for Missouri. A lot of people come
Mhm.
here to see where she lived. And so I think that that was delivered to me by osmosis, although I don't think that I ever got to go on a field trip to her house, which sucks.
Oh my
But
gosh.
I'm a big fan. I also at the same time was raised in kind of like a rural suburb. So we're not out in the country, but I wanted to be a country girl so
Mhm.
desperately. And so this book really appealed to me as like an adventurous young gal, which we will get into.
Mhm. It's so wholesome. Like you were
Yes.
describing your neighbor. One of the big questions that kept happening to me is like, why does this book endure, 190 years on? The first thing I noticed, and I think maybe this is just something I've been, ruminating on in my own life, she starts the book by describing like all the danger around them, the wolves, the cold, and it is completely safe in the house. There is such a
Yes.
definite sense of safety. And I've been thinking a lot about like if you don't have a sense of safety when you're young, if you don't think you can rely on your parents, that's going to mess you up a lot. It just kept coming back and back and back about like how safe they feel in this house. And it's not that there is like no conflict in the books, but if you're doing like a save the cat kind of thing, it's like it's man versus nature and then you're
Yeah.
just trying to survive. But it's I really loved it, and I've had like a very big sense of calm and like zen
Yes,
reading it.
100%,
Mhm.
100%. And yeah, like you said, there's a scene, like a very famous scene where her mom goes outside to get a cow into the pasture and it's a bear. And then there are wolves howling around the house later that winter and they feel so safe and tidy. Whereas like if wolves were howling around my house, I would be I don't know. I probably just die on the spot out of fright. I'm
Yeah.
certainly not going to call the cops. I like don't know what I would do. So, yeah, it's just like this little anecdote in her childhood,
Mhm.
like that one time that we were surrounded by predators, but we still
Yeah.
felt totally safe.
And her mom in that story slaps the bear,
Yeah, yes.
not just being near fully slaps it, which is there more information about Ma as the books go on? Because I had so many questions about Ma and was so fascinated by her.
There is, yeah, there's definitely more Ma. Something that's really interesting as the books go on. There are, I think, two that I have not read because they were the ones that were about boys, and I didn't care
Yes,
about
about
that.
Monzo.
Yes, about his upbringing. I never read that one because I was like, whatever. But Ma's character is really interesting because the books do get into the hardships that the family has faced because they
Mhm.
move in like every book to
Yeah.
like a different corner of the country. So they're always on the move, like just trying to make it. But I actually pulled up this quote that I
Yeah.
mistakenly thought was in Little House in the Big Woods. And the whole time that I was reading it, I was like looking for it, looking for it. And then I realized that it's actually in Little House on the Prairie, or maybe Little Town on the Prairie, but it's in like a later book. And it's Ma is talking to Laura and she goes, what your figure will be, goodness knows, because Laura's like eating snacks, like doing some normal behavior. And she says, when I was married, your pa could span my waist with his two hands, which is psycho. But I love it so much because Laura just says he can't now.
Dear Lord.
That it comes up multiple times, which is so wild to me. I think that it is mentioned around the maple syrup candy making
Yeah.
part, which is
Which
really
was so
magical.
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to be so affected by like the doll mini narrative going on.
Yes,
So,
Charlotte.
yeah, so in the beginning, Mary, the older sister, has a real doll, and Laura just has a corn husk doll named Susan. And the real doll is named Nettie, and there was a line, sometimes Mary let Laura hold Nettie, but she did it only when Susan couldn't see. I felt like crying.
To be clear, Susan doesn't have eyes.
Susan is
She's
a
corn.
corn.
She's made of corn. Let's be crystal clear about that. Yes, that is also so funny because they are not that far apart in age. I think
No.
Mary is like 2 years older than Laura, maybe.
Mhm.
And it's so funny that the parents are like, youngest girl gets only corn. That's a vibe.
Like, I was really surprised later. Like in one of the last chapters, they go to town, and this like huge bubble of resentment comes up that felt like it was out of nowhere for between Laura and Mary. But this makes sense for resentment that you get leftovers for your doll.
Are you a younger sibling? Do you have younger
I'm
siblings?
an only child,
Ah,
so it's just
okay.
me.
Yes. So I'm the oldest of three, and
Mhm.
I feel like that is a very real phenomenon. Like the hand-me-downs, and like
Yeah.
my parents famously have like 4 photo albums of like the first 2 years of my life, and my sister has like one picture of her like with crazy hair. That's
Yeah.
it. That's all. She would have had the corn girl.
Yeah. I don't know if it's, Laura Ingalls' memory, but like the intense relationship between her and Pa was like it felt familiar to me. Like I'm really close with my dad, but it was also like this is gonna upset other people. How do Mary and Ma feel about this? Because this is
Yeah.
really intense.
It is
Yeah.
really her relationship with her family is so clear, I think, in the book.
Mhm.
And I remember seeing this snippet that in the book she's like age 4 to 5, but in real life, the timeline that this was happening and she was 3. And I think
Mhm.
that she sent the book into the publisher. I don't know if you saw this, and they made her change it because they said there was no way a 3-year-old remembered like the depth of those family dynamics, which is so interesting because that's a
Yeah.
question that I've gotten a lot about my book too. Like, how do
Mhm.
you remember how you felt about this thing when you were 8? And I think you kind of just sometimes do.
Yeah. And that was something I think like something that really blew my mind in thinking about this book was like the world is as big as your house, and the population of the world is your siblings and your parents and maybe some cousins. And when they talked about cousins or grandpa, they still live in the big woods, capital B, capital W, which I love. But like there that the woods seem infinite to her was I was thinking like if you have a great family, awesome. Really weird and bad if you don't, then it's
Totally.
just you and the bears.
It's just you
Yeah.
and the bears and your dad like molding bullets by the fireside.
Throughout this I was looking for, echoes of my mom, and while they were doing that I was like, oh, my mom does love to say that she learned how to make shotgun shells before she learned how to read.
So was
So
she was raised in Kentucky, right? Your
yeah,
mom?
both my parents were. My dad was in Lexington, and my mom was in Paducah, way out by the river. Um,
Ah, cool.
which I don't know if you do you know anything about Paducah.
I've never been to Paducah,
Yeah,
no.
well, it's quilt capital of the world.
Oh, whoa.
I think Dippin' Dots were invented there.
That's amazing.
It's right on the Mississippi River, but I do love that small town feel, especially like I grew up in the suburbs in Maryland, but I went to high school like way out in the agricultural reserve.
Oh,
And
cool.
I'm on Welcome to Flatch, which is all about a small town, and I think that the smaller the group is, the more complicated the dynamics get.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. She says, but the best time of all was at night when Pa came home, which I remember doing a lot. My dad worked like on the other side of DC, so I had a long commute, a lot of traffic, and I remember just so much just like sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting
Oh,
and
that's so
waiting.
sweet. That's so sweet. Did your dad also play the fiddle by the fire at night?
No, but both my parents met in a community band, which
Oh my
is
gosh.
which is not like rock band, it's like marching band sitting down. Um, I had to like learn how to describe that for other kids when I was young because
That's
nobody.
so cool. What did they play?
Yeah, my dad plays bassoon and my mom plays flute and piccolo.
It's so funny to think about you guys sitting by firelight while your dad cranks out the bassoon. That's a really funny picture. My yes, like the papa. My dad is also musical. He picked up guitar at the age of like 53, and
Wow.
he's in his mid 60s now, and he's in a like a kind of a dad band, like an old man band. But he strums his guitar nonstop. I'm visiting them right
Mhm.
now, and we were watching a movie last night, and I had to be like, please stop strumming your guitar. We do go to his concerts, but he loves to play hard rock and classic rock, and so it's not quite the tranquil vibes of
Yeah.
Little House in the Big Woods. Did you
Yeah.
have something that I want to touch on in this book as
Yeah.
the the sugar snow in the winter. But I'm curious
Yeah.
from if you have when you were a kid, was there a season that was like most memorable to you? Like, were you like a summer girl, or
Mhm.
was it the holidays? What was it?
I think for me it was the holidays because we like everyone's birthday is clumped up in there. I'm December 6th, which I think is enough distance for me to really enjoy Christmas.
Hmm.
My dad is Christmas Eve. My grandmother is the day before, is the 23rd, and my mom's is January 3rd. So it's
Whoa.
all right there, and it which is weird looking back on it because my dad does not like his birthday. He does not like the holidays at all. So why was I so chipper? What about you?
I think for me it was summertime. I am much older than both of my siblings, and
Mhm.
summers I was pretty much uh babysitting was the summer for me. But we also were a like a Midwestern baseball family, which is a
Oh,
very unique culture. And so from the time that my brother was old enough to like hit a ball, we spent most summer weekends traveling for his baseball tournaments, which at the time I hated, obviously.
yeah.
But now I wish I could go back, because like an opportunity to tan your legs and read a book while you listen to like 10-year-old boys scream at each other, like that sounds that's amazing. I did not know what I
Yeah.
had. So I think that that's like where the core of our family memories are. We're like summer baseball
Yeah.
weekends.
Wow. The core memories I have from summer are like sitting in my basement, like doing math packets. It's like being very happy. It's like it's cool down
Whoa,
there, but that's the core memory. I was
that's
like,
cool.
my mom's whole side of the family is very much like we're defining ourselves by academic success, and that's the
Got
family
it.
thing.
Got it.
I had a note about the Jack Frost images, and there, it's like I don't want to like mess up or do anything to Jack Frost's images. We're just gonna treasure those and leave them there. I thought that was so cute.
Yes, the ones that he painted on the windows, you
Yeah,
mean? Okay, yes.
yeah.
So for those who are not familiar, there's like this belief that little teeny Jack Frost comes through with like a little paintbrush and like paints things on the ice and the snow, which is so romantic. I
Yeah.
think she writes about like childlike belief in a really wonderful way too.
Yeah.
That I still enjoyed like reading this as an adult.
Mhm.
But okay, let's talk about sugar snow. So
Okay.
I pulled up this passage. They call it a sugar snow when men can make more sugar only for men, not for girls, as a result of a cold spell creating a longer run of sap in the
Mhm.
trees. So they go visit their grandpa to harvest the sap, and there is a dance, which sounds incredible as
Yeah,
well.
it sounds so fun.
Yeah, yeah. And then they make this like maple syrup candy where they like I think pour the hot sap until it hardens and it forms these little candies. And I think that's when everybody's like, "Ma, you used to be so skinny. Like, what's up, girl?"
And there's a moment where we don't know if there's going to be enough for everyone, and then there is, and there's always enough for everyone, and nobody is left out. And it felt like Ohana means family. It felt
Yeah.
so comforting, and
It's so
so
comforting, and and
yeah.
everybody in the family gets along. There's never like
Mhm.
a scuffle. I think that there is a summertime scuffle between Laura and Mary, and Laura gets a whipping, but
Yeah.
that's far in the future.
Yeah. Everyone loves each other and everyone has a purpose, which I think is maybe a benefit to being a homesteader is like you know your value because it's that I milk the cows or I do this like it's a really concrete thing that you bring to the table. The next note I had was again on this thing of fear. I think I'm in a well, I don't know, am I in a place or is it like a really big topic in this book?
Yeah, I think that in the series as a whole, like uncertainty is a huge
Hmm.
theme, because again, like they are going from like Wisconsin to south to Kansas, and then back up north to South Dakota or North Dakota,
Hmm.
and then over to Missouri. And these are like huge, like
Yeah.
multi-month travel expeditions. And there's illness strikes the family, and there's tragedy later on in the series. And I think that like uncertainty and the spirit of like frontiersmanship and
Hmm.
exploration is a huge theme. But also when you're little, when you're like 4 and 5, everything is unknown,
Yeah.
and everything is scary. But I think that it's true what you said, that like everything in the house is safe. And also Laura feels so safe and like held by her family
Hmm.
that she doesn't fully grasp the gravity of like having wolves outside.
Yeah.
Because she's like, we're cool, like dad
Mhm.
is playing the fiddle, mom is the skinniest lady in the county, like we're solid.
Yeah, they even I pulled out a quote. They're playing Mad Dog and they're telling stories about panthers and there's a quote,
Yeah.
Laura and Mary loved to be scared like that. And I was like, it's the next thing I have is like they were comfortable and happy there, especially at night.
I think okay, so this is how I am. I
Yeah.
read about this in my book too, where I am a huge scaredy cat in real life. I'm specifically really scared of sharks and like big fish. That's like my biggest fear on earth. And I love movies about sharks and like scary ocean adventures and just like horror in general, even though I am like truly the biggest scaredy cat ever, because as long as I am like in my little house, safe in
Yeah.
my little house, nothing can get to me and the shark is on the screen. That Panther reference is so Missouri, even though this book does not take place in Missouri, but that is like having like bobcats outside screaming is like
Mhm.
such an Ozarks vibe.
Wow, man, 'cause I was wondering about that. But it's hilarious you bring up sharks. I like 20 minutes before we started recording this, I finished watching Deep Blue Sea for the first time.
Huge. Oh my God. I actually have a date with myself to rewatch The Meg in like 2 days because The Meg 2,
Hmm.
The Meg 2 is coming
Tomorrow?
out.
Yeah.
You know, it's coming out tomorrow and I will be there with bells on first in line.
I'm so excited. I also love Jaws. Jaws is what I like every phase of my life I get like a new movie that we have to rewatch on the 4th of July and it just keeps getting longer and longer.
What was
Uh,
this year's?
it was Jaws first and then now I have to look it up because
Yeah, I
it
gotta
was
know.
weird. Yeah, well, here. We started the day off with the Marx Brothers Horse Feathers.
Whoa, okay.
Um, I think my boyfriend just like opened TCM because I love TCM and just put on the first thing. And
Love
it was
that.
cool because I was like, oh, this starlet mysteriously died. Do you know about this? And I left to shower and I came back and he was like, she didn't mysteriously die. Like they had an answer. And we started
How,
debating
oh no,
this whole
how'd
thing.
she die?
So her name is Thelma Todd. She is like found hunched over in her car garage,
Oh God.
and it's ruled carbon monoxide poisoning. But I say that's bullshit because first off, her boyfriend is a mobster, and earlier like that week was like, "I'm gonna kill you,"
Oh,
and
oh my
she
God.
owned a restaurant like in front of everyone in this restaurant. And she was a car girly. She worked on cars. She would have
So she
known about
knew.
this. And there were
Yes.
PSAs all over the place
Oh
about
my
carbon
God.
monoxide poisoning.
Okay, well, let me just say that would have never happened in the little house in the big woods. They only had
Yeah.
horses.
But the 4th of July this year was Horse Feathers, The Meg, and Stargate for the
Oh,
first time,
wow,
which
that's a
was
really spectacular lineup. That's really good.
it was a really good 4th of July. All of my quotes I'm realizing are the same thing. But Laura and Mary listened to that lonely sound in the dark and cold of the big woods, and they were not afraid.
Doesn't
And
that sound amazing to do that with
yes.
your like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I especially like these last few weeks have been so overly plugged in. Reading
Mhm.
this book was like such a balm. And I was also like, we should get rid of the internet.
Yes. It I've had to delete a lot of social media from my phone, partly because it's making me sad, and also partly it's like some thoughts can just stay inside, and I need
Totally.
to learn that again.
Yes.
There's
And
not.
also, I mean, girls should milk cows, I think,
Yeah.
is another lesson we can learn.
When I was in maybe elementary or middle school, or maybe high school, you had to get a certain amount of like volunteer hours to graduate high school. And so I was in Girl Scouts. So they took us to a horse farm. And I miss the days of shoveling shit. I really
Okay.
do.
So I also volunteered on a horse farm when I was younger. When I was in the fourth grade, my mom pulled me out of school in an attempt to homeschool me for a year, which was like a really bad idea. I was like my lost year. Like I did not learn anything. But I went and volunteered at this ranch, like with this program for homeschool kids. And I also miss shoveling shit. Like what a satisfying sensation.
Yeah, there is. I think especially because like we're both in the arts and writing just takes forever. Even when I was on Flatch, it took a full year for the first season to come out. There
Yeah.
and shoveling horseshit, I moved stuff from over here to over here, and it's so physical, and I can do it, and it's in my body, and I can point to it, and it's just there's very much something to be said for that, I think.
Yes, 100%. And yeah, it is like immediate progress. I think it's why I
Mm.
love watching Love Island when I'm working on longer editorial projects because you know somebody's getting dumped from the island in a day. Like there will be a sense of finality.
Not only there's a finality, but also like there's things moving. Things we're progressing
Yeah,
towards something
exactly.
in the end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so
there's
true. Wow.
yeah.
We got to talk about the pig bladder,
Yes.
assuming that this is on your list. So,
Mhm.
for readers who are not familiar, obviously no internet, baby, no TV, only a corn for a doll, so not a lot of entertainment. There's this really evocative scene, and I don't know if your version of the book was illustrated, but
It
mine has
was, yeah.
pictures, and there's this really wonderful picture of them during the meat harvest, like the butcher season. They use up every part of the pig, and the dad puts the bladder in the smokehouse, I believe, to dry it out, to get the blood and guts off of it, and then the girls get to blow it up like a little balloon. So there's this wonderful picture of them blowing up the bladder and slapping it around like a little goddamn hacky sack.
Yeah.
And that
And
was
it's
like a huge thing.
and it's like the first or second chapter in the book.
Yeah.
It's really early on, and then
Yeah.
they like there's a whole thing about like who's gonna get to eat the pig's tail, who's gonna get to eat the pig's
Yes.
tail. It's a huge
Which,
thing.
like, girls, gross. But it
Yeah.
is also like when I was a kid, we were definitely not like a fancy family by any means, and we would usually eat like the same couple meals pretty
Yeah.
like in rotation. It's like
Yeah.
classic, like we, there were a lot of kids running around, and we had like taco soup and bread. And I always wanted like ham and beans night and reading Little House on the Prairie while eating ham and beans. Like, can you imagine anything more glamorous than that? I just like felt like the coziest I would have ever felt in my life. And like
Yeah.
at the same time, when I was eating ham and beans with like tons of ketchup on it, obviously, I would be like, this is what she ate.
Yeah. I'm just
This is
like
what
her.
she ate. I'm just like her. When in like they certainly didn't have spices. Like their ham and beans tasted so bad. All that food tasted bad, even the maple candy. But at the time, I was like, I want to go back so bad. Like I was born in the wrong era.
And one thing I appreciate about this book, you brought up the smokehouse. I feel like I could build a smokehouse now. She's like
Yes.
very informative and specific, just in case you need this, which I like. I really appreciate. Little
No,
Women. I like.
totally.
I unfairly compare it to Little Women, which is like they're published at very different times. Whatever, but love that book. They did not teach me how to build a smokehouse. They did
No,
not
those
teach me what a pig's bladder looks like.
love those girls, love them, but they were a little prissy, all of them. And Laura is anything but prissy. She is out here knocking the bladder around. She's talking to a little thing of corn like it's a baby. It's a whole thing. Yeah, okay, that's so funny you say that, because I feel like I personally have a sickness where I think that I could be a homesteader if I had to. Like if like my parents' house just lost power for 2 days, 48 hours, and I was like, if this goes on much longer, I'm gonna have to build us a new house. Like, and I think I could. Here's the thing. Like I think I could make a life in the woods when I like objectively I absolutely could not, but I'm like, yeah, I could build a smokehouse, like no problem.
And I think like again the degree of safety is what part of that mentality of like, well, Pa's there. Like
Yeah.
he's not gonna be there, but I feel like he's there. He always gets him on the first shot.
He always gets him on the that's yes. And he saves the pigs from the bears. And that's so funny that you say that about the smokehouse instructions. I've never thought about that. But yeah, we could build a smokehouse in LA.
Yeah. And the illustrations you mentioned, I did a little digging. Like the original ones were done by a woman and they looked like woodcut blocks. They were pretty simple. And then I think in the 50s a guy came in and did a lot more, and those were the ones I saw with the bladder, which is like gray. And I really liked them because this is the fourth episode I've done. 3 of them have been illustrated. Bad Case of Stripes, this one, and Cupid Doesn't Flip Hamburgers. And the whole time I've been dealing with this, like, how realistic the drawings look, because my guest was very frightened of Bad Case of Stripes because it looks really, really real.
Yeah, that book is incredible. Wow.
Yeah. Episode 2, watch for it. And this illustration, it's not like a kid could do it, but like a really talented high schooler could do it.
Yeah.
And it's that level of distance that I think brings comfort, because like there's a story early on where, like you said, Pa saves the pigs from the bear, and there's an illustration where the bear is holding a pig just like to its belly, and it's like, oh me, and it looks so innocent.
That's one of my favorites in the whole book. Oh my gosh. It also must be said that like I think the illustrations in the newer version do a really good job of communicating how Laura feels compared to her big sister, because Mary is like, she has like long wavy blonde hair, and Laura has like short and stick straight hair that's like always kind of like sticking up in weird directions, and Mary is like clearly the beauty of the family. And there's also a tragedy befalls Mary. I don't know when no spoilers.
You can spoil it, it's okay.
Okay, but yeah, but later in the series, cholera strikes the family. I think maybe it's scarlet fever, but a bad disease strikes the family, and Mary is is left blind. It takes her sight from her, and it's this very tragic thing. And Laura has to like go to work as a teacher so that they can have the money to send Mary to a special school for people with vision impairments. And it's a really weird relationship between the two of them.
Yeah. Oh man. I want to read the whole series anyway, but
Yeah.
especially for that. And in the last couple chapters, they go to town and Laura starts, she's talked about their hair, that Mary has these golden ringlets, and the phrase that Laura always uses is dirt brown for her hair. And this conflict really comes up when they go to town. But again, this was like my mom's favorite book. One of the weird things I've noticed in my mom my whole life is she's like, there are blondes and there are brunettes. And the blondes are bitches and they're cheerleaders and they're mean and they're stupid. And brunettes are maligned and smart and we read books and we're shy. My mom is a brunette.
Erin, you have red hair. Where do you
well,
fit in that?
Yeah, where do I fit in? Because I always thought I had brown hair, and then I got to college, and people were like, "What are you saying? You're a blonde." But in my baby photos, it's kind of red, and so the whole time, my mom, I think, was just like, just glad I didn't get her hair. Like she would take me to the hairdressers, and the hairdresser would be like, "This is not your hair. This is your husband's hair. This is not yours."
Oh my gosh. So she's a brunette.
She's a brunette. Like there were some years where she was dyeing it blonde, but the first time I really noticed it was when Elizabeth Holmes was popping off. Because my mom got so angry at Elizabeth Holmes because she was like, she's blonde and she's getting all these men to give her money.
Oh my God.
Mom, she's using the system for her benefit. She is using these men's prejudices. Like Elizabeth Holmes is a pet fascination for me. I think I wondered if this is where it came from.
That is so interesting. I'm trying to think of like comparative texts. I was a big fan of the Ramona books also, Ramona and Beezus. I think Beezus also had brown hair, but I remember Ramona describing her own hair as like dishwater brown or like some like derogatory brown. Yeah, what was with that? I feel like brown rocks, one of our best hair colors for sure.
Yeah. So at one point there's a chapter all about Sundays. And Pa says that it used to be that girls have to be prim and proper every day, not just Sunday. And it was harder for little girls before. Yeah, I don't need to read the quote. I just said that. I'm really enjoying doing this podcast and this book during the summer of Barbie, the summer of girlhood. It's looking back, we're in a better place in terms of beauty standards than before, but the beauty standards are so surprisingly narrow. Like every time you look back, they get even more narrow than you remember. Totally. And that brown hair is not even right. And you have to, your husband has to fit his hands around your waist. It just keeps going and getting weirder and more specific.
These like wildly rigid expectations of femininity. Yeah, that's so crazy. And I do feel like they still, we are lucky, like we both live in like big cities and I live in Chicago and like progressive communities, but sometimes I am reminded that like there are still so many people out there who feel that way. It's crazy.
We were talking about the illustrations. I love them. They're tactile in a way. Like I want to hug them. Yeah. And there's a lot of storytelling, which I found interesting in this book. Like as a form of entertainment, what else are you going to do? Yeah. But there's, at least in my book, they're talking about Pa walking home and he hears this voice and doesn't know who it is. And in my book, the book shows you an owl illustration before it is revealed in the text.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay.
So like even, and maybe this is like because I read an ebook version, who knows, but like even the book is telling you like, look, it's an owl, it's okay. It's okay. It's like there's nothing to fear and there's enough syrup for everyone. At one point, Pa says, if you'll do as you're told, no harm will come to you.
Wow. That is, I really believed that for a long time.
I don't
know. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I was raised in the church, in the evangelical church, and that is definitely kind of a message that if you like are solid as a rock and you do everything you're supposed to in church and out of church, then you're going to be A-okay all the time, which I gotta tell you, it's not how it goes. That's not how it goes.
Well, and it's interesting that religion plays such a small part in this book. Like they only talk about church in one chapter, and it's not even really about worship or prayer or God. It's just part of the habit and the ritual. And I was not raised in the church, but I'm fascinated by it. I think because I was raised outside of it, and I think I'm really fascinated by it mostly because like faith is just a thing that's so foreign to me.
Yeah.
But I was reading that chapter and I was like, why does God have to be joyless? Why does God have to be observed by us sitting and not having fun? Doesn't God
So
love
true.
children laughter? That was the thing that really, I was like, why is this happening? Why? I think God loves us.
I
I'm
love that. There's I of the friends that I have that were raised in more fundamentalist churches,
Mhm.
which there are quite a few in my hometown. I have some friends who are raised like homeschooled full time for
Mhm.
all of their school. And these books are a really popular curriculum with those
Yeah,
folks. They don't touch super strictly on faith, but I think that they play into those same beliefs that like
yeah.
you honor your father and mother, or you get a spanking, you kind of know your place in the household, you're quiet and respectful on Sundays, and you obey, which is really interesting that it's yeah, it is really surprising that faith is like not touched on more in the books.
And on the obedience, because I think that's like now we're talking about church, but I think like
Yeah.
the goal isn't less to be a good person and more to be an obedient person. And I
Yeah.
think they only touch on it briefly, but I think like the kids aren't even allowed to speak at the dinner table, which
Yeah.
is such a little throwaway detail, and yet that's gotta mess with your mind. That's
I
intense.
do wonder if it's different because these are girls too. I don't know enough
Oh.
about the practices of the era to know if
Mhm.
little boys would have been allowed to talk at the table. I suspect that maybe all children were meant to be seen and not heard, but
Yeah.
I'm still curious about that.
I cried when Laura got her doll at Christmas. Just
Yeah,
what a
Charlotte.
I cried. I fully cried.
It's a huge
But
moment.
it is. And it's like again, like I didn't think I would care and I cared so much.
Yeah.
But we touched on it earlier. Laura is sort of as an adult no holds barred in terms of talking about her family of like this is
Yeah.
exactly who we were. And you touched on it. You write about your own life, like how I have so many questions about like how does this book play into that, but also like how do you like I've written about my parents, but it hasn't been produced. And like in this podcast, I'm sort of deciding like what do I want to put out there and what do I want to keep to myself. And I was sort of like, how do you make those decisions for yourself? How do you make those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mostly asked. I have a really good relationship with my family. It hasn't always been that way, and so I think I'm pretty protective of that.
Yeah.
Now that we have like healed a lot of that. My parents are also both pretty open books. My dad is like so gross, and he loves like really crass jokes, and so I like called him to ask if he was okay with me including this like detail about like his butt in a book, and he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." He like shows it to all of his friends. He loves that, so he's easy. My mom is a little bit more guarded, and there is one funny story in my book that she is not happy that I included, and so I think if I could go back I probably would have taken that out just to respect her privacy. But I am kind of the mindset that like right now at this point in my life it is not as worth it to me to air as much about my family in a public setting. That might change when I am a little older, or when I am my parents are no longer around, but I yeah, it just wasn't worth it to me. And same goes for my community as well. Like I have a really strong relationship with where I was raised in Missouri, and it's obviously a really complicated part of the country
Mhm.
socially and politically. And I tried really, really hard to explore that in a way that was never exploitative of the area. That's really important to me. I'm working on another book project as well about American folklore, and it's so important to me
Oh.
to be super respectful
Mhm.
um, of that. So yeah, I guess like I am an open book about myself, and in some ways that requires me being open about like my family and the circumstances
Mhm.
under which I was raised. But I my parents are really proud of the book.
Mhm.
They're proud of me, and we're having a hometown release event tomorrow, and a
Oh
lot
my
of their like
gosh.
older friends are coming, and like my mom does nails for a living, and a lot of her like old lady nail clients are coming, and I would never ever want those people to read the book and be like, wow, like Lillian shit on her
Yeah.
family. That's just not where I'm at right now.
Did your parents grow up where you grew up, or do you like?
No.
Mhm.
So my mom's whole family is Ozarks based for the most part. She has some family in like the northern part of the state, but where that's like where the roots are. And then my dad is from Texas. So he's very Texan, and he has a
Mhm.
lot of family in Oklahoma still.
Okay.
Most of his family's moved on from Texas. But yeah, so the South and the Ozarks is still
Yeah.
like the home region for both of them.
Nice. I love that you're protective of your family and your community.
Yeah.
That's so special. I love that very
Totally.
much.
Yeah, it's important to me. Even for my siblings, both of my siblings are quite a bit younger and they don't come up in the book very much. And that was intentional, just because they are still like very, very young adults. And I want them to be able to explore that privately until they get a little older. And then I can say whatever I want when they're in their 30s and 40s. Nothing is safe.
I think that was some of the things that in the little research I did that like spurred Laura to write about it was that I think her mom passed and my cat just woke up from a nap and he has to announce it.
Good morning, brother.
Hi.
Oh, listen to him.
Are you gonna
Hi,
hop on my
man.
keyboard?
Wait, what's his name?
Texas Toast.
Oh my God, that's such a cute name. I have a cat named Tuesday. She is back up in Chicago, but I miss her very much.
And what is your dog's name? Your beagle? I was
have
trying to remember it this
Archie.
morning. Archie.
Yes, Archie the Beagle. He and Tuesday are like casual acquaintances. They just kind of like go around each
Coworkers.
other. Yeah, exactly.
The next thing I have on my list, again, it is about Ma, is that there's so little about her. The only thing that I found that was like specific backstory was Ma had been very fashionable before she married Pa.
Yeah, what happened after she married Pa? It was like she was fashionable. She had the world's tiniest waist in a way that made her worrisome and breakable. Like what did Pa do to her?
Yeah, and they're also she knows a lot about the moon, surprisingly.
Yeah.
She knows that like she knows what's up there, which I'm not saying she's delusional. I'm saying she has some learning to her.
She's informed. She's astrologically informed. I do get the idea from the book that Ma was like kind of like the picture of refinement, which could be just like how we see our moms when we're little girls sometimes, but it does kind of it's kind of like Pa came along and like swept her off her feet and now she's like out here slapping bears.
Yeah, and she's so barely there in the books. Like
Yeah.
she's there and I think relationships between mothers and daughters are one of the most complicated out there. And it's
Yeah.
like obviously they're children's books, but that and with Pa being so close with Laura, fascinating. Fascinating. That's all I have to say.
It is. Yeah, it is.
And they touch on Uncle George, who was wild since he came back from the war.
Oh, which is I'm so glad you brought that up. I
Yeah.
forgot to write that down. When I read this as a kid, I have a really distinct memory because I think there is a picture of Uncle George with a big beard, if I remember correctly. And I took wild to mean like that was like a fun thing. Like he came back from the war and he was wild. When I was a kid, I was like, everybody has a fun, like he's like crazy uncle. Like he's out, he's like dancing on the table. He's like got these big boots. He's like this larger than life character. And rereading it now as an adult, I was like, that's not what that meant at all. Like he was obviously, and the Civil War, I'm assuming, obviously did not. It was obviously deeply traumatized. Hey, Texas Toast!
What is he doing? Stop it. I don't know even what that was. What was that? Oh, it was a picture frame. He didn't like that picture. He doesn't like when he's not the center of attention.
That's how Tuesday is too. It's okay. I understand.
He seems very traumatized. He's still wearing his uniform. He plays the bugle every morning.
Yeah.
And I looked it up because I was like, we have to know about this. I mean, Charles had a brother named George who I think would have been way too young to be in the army. Or like there might have been, was it in the book that they said he like ran away to be like a little fife boy? Where am I getting that?
A little fife boy? I don't remember. So you looked up like their actual family lineage.
Yeah, I looked up like what's up with George Ingalls.
Yeah.
And it seemed like George was kind of a normal guy, which makes me wonder why he included it. And
that's really interesting. I wonder if it was some sort of like reference to like a neighbor or another family member that she wanted with an identity like she wanted to protect. I don't know. But yeah, that was so striking to me this last read. Because it's so different than the way that I remember it. I remember her just having like a really kooky uncle who was like an awesome time. And it's like, oh no, he's deeply traumatized and like not okay.
And I'm thinking it's like it's 30s. We've gone through the First World War and she's an adult now but I wonder if my cat is standing on the keyboard.
Texas Toast.
He was being so good all morning.
He's so handsome. I love him.
We used to live in South LA and there were just so many cats just wandering around. And this one came into our yard and didn't leave. And
that's him? And that's where he came from? Oh, congratulations,
from.
Texas Toast.
Yeah. And his name just came from like we had like a cat flap in the window. And every time my boyfriend talked about him, he would just say like a different noun. And that was the one that stuck.
That's really good.
button came. Here's mop. Here's clip.
Here's here's Clip.
Is there anything more that we want to touch on with the syrup and the dance? Because I loved that section. It was so
Yeah.
sweet.
I think that reading it now, I have this thing where I think that it's maybe just like me being a tomboy at heart, but ever since I was a little kid, I've like never felt super comfortable, like really dressed up. I feel really comfy in like a sweatshirt and overalls and jeans. That's when I feel like the cutest. And especially if I'm like out at, at the river or like canoeing and like in a little one piece swimsuit, like I feel the most like feminine and like in touch with my body in that state. And this scene really reminded me of that because she talks about like the beautiful women, but they were wearing like a shawl, like they were wearing
Yeah.
like their like special crocheted shawl. And I just remember thinking that they must have been like the prettiest girls ever when I was reading this as a little girl. It made me feel really in touch with that, just like that. um I don't know, I guess more like down home kind of
Yeah.
femininity. I don't know.
Yeah.
That just reminded me of that. But yeah, doesn't that sound like the coolest night?
Yes, it's everyone is in grandma's house in like
Yeah.
one room. All of the babies are on grandma's bed, just
Yeah.
shoving up against each
But
other.
that part's so funny. Yeah, it says I don't think that they're like bundled or like swaddled or anything. They're just like on the bed.
Just on the bed, and Laura and her cousin, also named Laura, are arguing about which baby is cuter,
Yeah.
which is like how wholesome can you get? It is a cold time of year, but it is warm inside. Everyone has enough sugar. There is
Yeah.
dancing. Even George, with maybe a shadowy background of trauma, is
Yeah.
still dancing, is like still super fun, is still like the light of the life of the party.
Yeah.
It's also community, which is something I've really been longing for, and I think that like when you are an only child that you really long for, and that like everyone's here. Everyone in the world that matters is here, and we're
Yeah.
all having a good time.
And
And
you can like depend on them also. Like there's
mhm.
that scene I think when it's harvest time and dad just like somehow finds a bunch of men that have like threshing
Yeah,
equipment, and that really struck me because I was like, I don't know, it does seem like a very like neighborly community driven
yeah,
situation in the big woods.
that they were just like driving by with
Yeah.
newfangled machinery
Yeah.
and offered to help. My favorite thing about the spring season is when cousin Charlie gets stung by a whole bunch of bees, because the
Yeah.
illustration is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my
When
life.
he's like, look.
Yeah, well, no, when he's all wrapped up, and they're like, "You're covered head to toe in bee stings. We're gonna roll you in mud and then wrap you up so only your little mouth and your little nose can peek
A
out."
little tiny face.
And then there are all of the girls just looking over him, looking at this dumbass. I have started keeping like a digital diary on Canva, and I put that in because it was just so
I
funny. I
love
loved
that.
it so much.
That's really good. Wow.
And I thought it was so interesting them going into town, and how town is one store and a beach, it
Yeah.
seems. And
Yeah.
she's terrified of it. Like she's more terrified of civilization than she is of wolves, which is
Yeah.
maybe like maybe logical, maybe reasonable. And that's where this sort of resentment with Mary, at least that I saw it, came in. Did you?
Because
Yeah.
because Mary was like more comfortable in the
Mhm.
town setting, do you mean?
Yeah, I think she's also, like more the standards of beauty. She gets
Yeah.
like her lollipop has more writing on it than Laura's, which
I forgot about that.
I'm sure is very much what happens when you have siblings.
Yeah,
Is
totally. Yeah, I think you're right. I can't help but think about the scene in the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice movie when they
Mhm.
go to town and they're like buying ribbons too. And this is like a way stripped down version of that because I don't think anybody's getting ribbons in
No.
town. But it always makes me think of that.
Yeah, I don't know where I had read it in other books, but I feel like our generation, everyone read at least one kids book where they're talking about calico and how it's so
Yes.
huge that mom gets a calico.
Oh my God, that is so true. And I still don't fully know what calico is, what it means, what it looks like, but I'm picturing like a rich indigo blue pattern
Mhm.
situation. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I came from a big cat family, and I was like, I know that cat's a
Yeah.
calico, so I don't really get it, but okay, mom
I'm gonna
seems
look it
really,
up actually.
yeah.
Now, while we're sitting here,
Mhm.
calico dress. Let's see. everything I've just pulled up is the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Now I have to
Um,
look.
I don't fully understand if is calico the kind of the fabric that we're looking at? Because
I think
well, here's
so.
one that slays a little bit. Why is this $425? Dear God. Oh, okay. Printed cotton fabric. Well,
Oh,
all right.
okay.
Okay.
All right. I guess sure. And I guess that is like the nice thing of like make it how you want it. Like,
Make it how you want. Wait, okay,
yeah.
this is funny. What is calico? It's a heavy, plain woven textile. It may also contain unseparated husk parts in your dress. So that's kind of something.
Man, to match your doll.
Yeah. Corn doll, corn dress, corn girl.
When they're talking about harvest or like planting season and stuff, Pa says a man just has to keep everlasting at it, or the woods will take back the place. And that feels
Wow.
like the essence of the book, kind of. It's just
Yeah.
like,
That feels very manifest destiny, which is not
mhm,
something that's really obviously the socio-political implications that are not explored in this
yeah,
book. But that is such a funny idea that uh the kind of the woods are for the taking. That's very frontiersman. All you have to do is like make sure that you keep at it. That's so interesting.
yeah.
I think I must have skipped over that.
And that if you keep at it, again, it's sort of like if you just do as you're told, all will be well.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
it is obviously an oversimplification, but also I would love it to be true and
yeah,
to
100%.
yeah.
Oh my God, I'm sure that my dad, who is like constantly hacking away at the grass in his front yard, would also love that to be true.
Yeah. The final like paragraph took my breath away.
Yeah.
I I'm gonna read it because it deserves it. When the fiddle had stopped singing, Laura called out softly, "What are the days of Old Lang Syne, Pa?" "They are days of a long time ago, Laura," Pa said. "Go to sleep now." But Laura lay awake a little while listening to Pa's fiddle softly playing and to the lonely sound of the wind in the big woods. She looked at Pa sitting on the bench by the hearth, the firelight gleaming on his brown hair and beard and glistening on the honey brown fiddle. She looked at Ma, gently rocking and knitting. She thought to herself, this is now. She was glad that the cozy house and Pa and Ma and the firelight and the music were now. They could not be forgotten, she thought, because now is now. It can never be a long time ago.
That's so good. Mindfulness queen.
Yes.
Mindfulness queen. Uh
I have
yeah.
chills. Like,
No, it is.
what?
That's really beautiful.
Little House in the Big Woods is not like reinventing structure, reinventing
Yeah.
storytelling. Like it's just doing things well and earnestly and honestly. But that feels like metaphysical. That's
Yeah.
getting to like usually in the last three books I've done, you have to sort of like fish out little nuggets of like this is the moral, but here are other like lessons we can learn.
Right.
And that just like what to 100 immediately, and I want to read scholarly essays about it. Holy crap.
It is beautiful. She's an incredible writer, and
Mhm.
she does take you off guard. I think throughout I'm excited for you to read the series so
Yeah.
we can talk about it. But yeah, it is so beautifully written. And it also like she tried to sell these books as books for adults
Mhm.
initially, like you said. And I think that that shows in the way that it is like I loved these books so much as a kid, but now coming back to them as an adult, like the artistry of the writing is really something. It's not something that you see every day in this kind of
Yeah.
fiction.
Just the prose on its own. Like, one thing I noticed, and I didn't pull quotes out of it, she describes people's eyes a lot. And it's
Yeah.
always like glittering and sparkling and gorgeous. And I
Yeah.
just like, she seems to have a lot of love for the world, for all
Yeah.
of it and for everything. And that's so special and so wonderful.
Yeah, that has really I think that my taste has not changed all that much since I was reading this book because I still really love like naturalist texts that show that same thing. I'm really on a real Barbara Kingsolver kick right now. If you've
Oh,
ever read
mhm.
her, just read Demon Copperhead, and that was wonderful. And I read oh gosh, the one with the green Prodigal Summer last
I have
year.
that one. Yeah.
It's really beautiful, and it's the same way. Like it's so wonderful when you find a writer who loves the world and the natural world so much, and the way that they describe it just like is so titillate. Yeah,
Man.
please read it. It's so wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I just finished Tipping the Velvet last night.
Ooh,
Do you know anything about it?
no, huh?
It's late 1800s, lesbians, basically.
Okay.
It's this girl who starts out as like her family gets oysters, and she sees like a male impersonator, just a girl like in basically vaudeville dancing as a boy, and she falls in love. They become partners. She comes onto the stage as a male impersonator. It's like,
Whoa.
and she like goes through lots of highs and lows and different relationships and stuff, and it's sort of like, I think it's, I'm queer, and I think there is such an urge to like assign 21st century labels to the past
Yeah.
because we're so starved for representation. So it's hard, like, is she a lesbian? Is she trans? It's not really clear, and I think I like that about it.
Yeah.
It's also fun because it was written in the 90s, so when she uses queer and gay in context, it is still accurate, but also she knows what she's doing. And so
Yeah.
it was really fun. It wasn't like the best book I read this year, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking for the next thing. So maybe I'll do Prodigal Summer.
Yay. I also just finished Mrs. Caliban, which I would not consider a queer text, although I think it has been debated as such because it's about a housewife that falls in love with a mutant frogman, which is really fun. It was written
Okay,
in, I think,
what's the name?
1984. Yeah, it's called Mrs. Caliban. It's a novella, so it's like 100 pages.
Oh,
You can
hell
read it
yeah.
so quick. I would recommend it.
Yeah.
It's a really fun like poolside read, but it is
Hmm.
also a really interesting exploration of just all kinds of themes.
Oh, nice. I started reading a biography of Norma Shearer last night. She was
Oh,
a classic
cool.
Hollywood star. So I want to read that, but I think like when I do nonfiction, it's nice to have a little fiction appetizer beside it.
Yes, and this is like the perfect appetizer, truly. Like it is, you will read it in a day. It's
Oh
really
my
quick.
gosh. I'm so
Yeah,
excited.
that's so fun.
So I guess wrapping up,
Mm.
how do you feel? Like, was it as you remembered? What changed? How do you feel having come out of this experience of reading it again?
Yeah, I did not expect for it to be as similar to the way that I remembered it, but it was. It made me feel like almost exactly the same. I read it in a time where I was feeling really overwhelmed after the book came out and needed like a little respite. I think also a big theme of my book is like reconnecting with your child self and like
Hmm.
reclaiming the things that you loved as a kid that you were kind of like taught not to love as you got older. So it was so special to read that around that time. It was just really funny to like see different interpretations of things that like the wild uncle. Like that's so funny. But yeah, other than that, I think that it is like a timeless text. Like I loved it so much, and I think it has aged really beautifully.
Yeah. Would you consider it required reading?
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
should be
I
for
think so
sure.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. It like at the very least for anxious adults or anxious children, like
Yes.
it is such a nice place to spend some time.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it, there's a lot of different texts that get into that era. Also a big Cold Mountain fan.
Hmm.
But I'd say that this one is a lot this is politically neutral.
Yes.
This is a children's book, and that can sometimes be really nice to read.
Yeah. Yeah. And just spend some time with a world that is a lot less cynical and a lot more
Exactly.
earnest and
Yeah,
honest. Yeah.
definitely. It is now. I love that.
Man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you have anything you want to share or plug?
Oh, well, okay. So yes, I would love everyone on earth should buy my book and send me $1 million. But in lieu of that, you can follow me on Instagram at Original Spinster. That's my handle. I'm also on Twitter at the same handle. And my book is called Everybody's Favorite. You can buy it online from HarperCollins. You can get it from your local bookstore. I know it's in LA. I've had people send me pics from the bookstores. It's at Barnes and Noble, it's at Target, it's at everywhere you get your books. And yeah, keep up with me on social media for my next project, which I'm really excited about.